So good morning students. I am here to provide complete analysis on yesterday's question paper on financial management and economics for finance. And we are glad to inform you that in the yesterday's question paper, 81 marks have come from the guest questions released by us. Now, I want to do analysis of this question paper vis-a-vis with the guest questions released by us and our own material. So let us start doing the comparison. So you can see, so this is the yesterday's question paper. You know this is having two sections, section A and section B. Section A covers financial management and section B covers economics for finance. And moreover, in section A, there are 6 questions. Out of 6, question number 1, which is compulsory, having 4 internal questions. And question number 6, which is completely on theory. So there are 3 theory questions are there. So first question and second question carries 4 marks and third question carries 2 marks. In fact, for third question, you have an internal question, choice question. So this one, question number 1, which is compulsory. So student has to attend. It carries 4 internal questions of 5 marks each, 4 into 5, 20. In rest of the 5 questions, the student is required to attempt 4 questions. That means there is one choice question, 4 into 10, 40. At the same time, 4 into 5 marks, 20. 20 plus 40, 60 marks. So this is the part of section A. Then question number 1, I told you it is having 4 internal questions, A, B, C, D. So this one comes from debtors management and it is part of working capital management. So you can see a company's annual sales of current annual sales of SKD Limited 360 lakhs, and the directors of the company have an option that the company's current capital expenditure on receivables management is too high. With a view to reduce the expenditure, they are following the 2 alternative credit policies. One is they want to allow 1.5 months of credit, and in policy Y they want to allow 1 month credit. So 1.5 months, 1 month. In case if 1.5 months credit is allowed, 2% bad debts will be there. In case if 1 month credit is allowed, the percentage of bad debts will fall to 1%. But the annual collection expenses according to policy X are going to be 12 lakhs. If you are adopting the policy Y, that would be 20 lakhs. So the selling price per unit is 150 and the total cost is 120. Current credit terms are 2 months and the percentage of bad debts are 3%. You can see they are allowing 2 months credit to customers, and they are felt that the management is felt that yes, when we are allowing 2 months credit, so annual expenses, operating expenses are much high, and in order to reduce the operating cost associated with the investment in debtors, they want to reduce the credit period. So instead of offering 2 months credit, they prefer to provide 1.5 months credit or 1 month credit to its customers. So what we have to do? We have to compare the cost analysis related to credit policies. So what would be the annual operating cost if 2 months credit is allowed? What would be the operating cost if 1.5 months credit is allowed? What would be the annual operating cost if 1 month credit is allowed? So the basic objective is to reduce the cost of operation. Therefore, you have to choose a credit policy which is having lowest annual operating cost. So this is the analysis. But one thing you have to remember, when you start decreasing the credit period from 2 months to 1.5 months or 1 month, so usually it would have the negative impact on the company's revenue. In that event, what would happen? The sales will come down. You won't have 360 lakhs sales in all the cases, but there is no additional information with respect to revised sales. In that case, what we have to do, we have to assume that the sales of the company in the present scenario and the proposed scenarios will remain the same. In that event, there is no change in the variable cost of the company, there is no change in the fixed cost of the company, there is no change in the total cost of the company. As a result, for present policy, for proposed policy, the net benefit will remain the same. So what you have to do, you have to calculate total annual bad debts, annual collection costs, opportunity cost of debtors. So first calculate what would be the annual bad debts, what would be the annual collection expenses, what would be the opportunity cost of investment. Then add these expenses of present policy, proposed to policy. Then you have to see in which policy the total annual operating cost is going to be minimized. This is how we have to deal with. So this one, so management of working capital. So this was covered in CRD 21 in our material 6.18. You can see. HD Limited has sales of 960 lakhs. Selling price, variable cost is also given. Selling price and 75% of selling price, and the average cost or total cost per unit is 70. So you can see here selling price 150, total cost 120. Here selling price is 80 and the total cost is 70. The opportunity cost of funds is 12%, which is also given here 20%. Then average collection period is 75 days. So in this context, it was 2 months. Then bad debt losses are 4%. Sales and collection expenses are 15.6 lakhs according to the current policy. Sales are expected to decline to 920 lakhs. Average collection period to 60 days. So we are offering 75 days credit to customers. We want to reduce it to 60. So in this case, we have present policy. This is proposed policy. So we are doing an analysis of these two, and you can also see the present sales are 960 lakhs. When you start decreasing the sales from credit period from 75 days to 60 days, 960 lakhs sales has come down to 920 lakhs. It usually happens, but in the examination question, you can see there is no change in the revenue. So the analysis part in this contest is quite simple when compared to the question which is given in our material. So in this contest, in problem number 21, you have to calculate the annual benefit and annual cost. Finally, you have to find out the net benefit. In the examination question, there is no need to find annual benefit because the annual benefit of 3 policies remains the same. So what is here relevant here? Annual operating cost is relevant here. So when compared to the question which is given in our material, the question which is given in the examination is quite simple. Student can solve at ease. So that is why the percentage that we are given here 80%. Question number 2. This is from theory without taxes. It is a part of capital structure. So there are two companies, R Limited, S Limited. You can see S Limited is unlevered form, R Limited is a levered form. So what you have to find? You have to find the value of equity and the total value of both the companies. How to find value of equity? Value of equity is equal to earnings available to equity shareholders divided by cost of equity. You can see the cost of equity is given. Then how to find the earnings available to equity shareholders? EBIT minus interest. Since it is an unlevered form, so there are no taxes, there are no interest payments. Therefore, EBT becomes EAT, EAT becomes earnings to equity shareholders. Hence, EBIT minus interest becomes earnings to equity shareholders. First, you have to find out this, then this should be divided with KE to find the value of equity. That is quite simple. So, 10 lakhs minus 3.3 lakhs interest. Here, there is no interest. The resultant surplus profit goes to equity shareholders. That you have to capitalize with 18%, 15%. Part A is over. Part B. Total value of both companies. You know that value of firm comprises of value of equity and value of debt. In the previous point, in first point, you are going to find the value of equity. In case of S Limited, there is no value of debt. That case, value of equity and value of firm one and the same. In case of R Limited, you should add 33 lakhs to the value of equity so that the value of firm is going to arrive. This is a simple question and you can solve it with ease. You can see capital structure. This is covered in 4.13. This one. So here there are two companies, R Limited and S Limited. R Limited is a levered company, S Limited is an unlevered company. But in our material, so there is a company called Midair company which is currently having no debt. It is an all equity firm. That means unlevered. So currently it is having a profit of 24 lakhs. So both companies are having the operating profit of how much? 10 lakhs. If Midair begins to use debt, it borrows money at the rate of 8%. See, an unlevered firm wants to convert it as a levered firm. So we are doing business with the funds of equity. Now we want to start borrowing money from the lenders so that an unlevered firm converted as a levered firm. So you can see. Midair assets, the risk of Midair assets remains the same. Thus, EBIT, there is no change in EBIT. Is such that shareholders requires a return of 12%. At present, the existing shareholders of Midair Limited, when it is a unlevered firm, the shareholders are asking how much? 12% return. If no debt is used. So, using model without corporate taxes and assuming a debt of 1 crore. So in this context, the debt amount was 33 lakhs. So what is the difference between our problem and the problem which is given in the examination? In the examination, they are comparing the two different companies. But in our material, we are doing analysis of the same company. Once it is an unlevered company, thereafter it is converted as a levered company. So with the knowledge of problem number 14, the students can do this problem very easy and they can get the full marks from it. So you can see there is one more difference here. Here the cost of equity is given 18%. R Limited's cost of equity is 18%. S Limited cost of equity is 15%. When you start using the debt content, the cost of equity start increasing. In case of levered firms, the cost of equity is much higher than the cost of unlevered firms. That you can see here. So, in fact, this 18% is not correct. When you have two companies which are identical except their capital structure, then the value of levered company must be equal to the value of unlevered company. In that context, the cost of equity of R Limited should not be equal to 18%, that is much more than 18%. So if you do the valuation, the value of S Limited and value of R Limited, both are different. You won't get the same market value of these two companies. So in that context, there is a scope for arbitrage. The investors of overvalued company are start shifting from overvalued company to undervalued company, so that at one point of time the value of R Limited and the value of S Limited becomes equilibrium. So this context, the cost of equity which is given here is not correct. It creates a provision for arbitrage. So investors of overvalued company will look at the undervalued company and they start switching their investment from overvalued to undervalued. So this is about part B. Part C. This is on RADR, risk adjusted discounting rate. So what do you mean by RADR? Risk adjusted discounting rate is nothing but the discount rate which is used to discount the cash flows of a project. RADR says that when you have the different projects having different risk characteristics, you should not use the same discounting rate for all the projects. What you have to do? You have to increase the discounting rate or you have to reduce the discounting rate in line with the risk involved in the projects. In simple words, when you are having the projects having a higher risk, you should use higher discounting rate. When you are having the projects having lower risk, you should use lower discounting rate. Accordingly, we should make adjustments towards the discounting rate. That adjusted discounting rate, we call it as RADR. So how to find RADR? RADR is equal to RF plus risk premium. You can see what is RF here? 6%. What is RP here? 6%. What is RADR here? 12%. Then what you have to do? You have to calculate NPV of the project using RADR rate, 12%. Now to find NPV, you are required to find the cash flows of the projects and RADR. So I did RADR completion calculation here. This was 12%. What you have to do? You have to estimate the cash flows. How to estimate the cash flows? So cash flows are of two types: operating cash flows and terminal cash flows. The estimation of cash flows was already discussed in the investment decisions. You know this. So to find operating cash flows, what do you need? You want sales, you want variable cost, sales minus variable cost contribution, contribution minus fixed cost, PBDT minus depreciation minus tax. Then you have to add back the depreciation in order to get the tax benefit on depreciation claim. This is how the operating cash flows are estimated. You can see sales for the first 4 years are given. PV ratio is given. PV ratio shows the relation of contribution to sales. So they are saying that 50% is the contribution on sales. So sales into 50%, that gives you contribution. Contribution minus fixed cost. You can see the fixed cost in the next 4 years is going to increase 2 lakhs every year. So sales minus variable cost, contribution minus fixed cost, then you get PBDT. You can see, ignore interest and taxes. That's all. If no interest and no taxes, PBDT becomes PAT. PAT becomes what? Cash profit. So this is how the cash flows are estimated. After estimating the cash flows, what do you have to do? You have to discount with 12%. So this, sir, why this is 6% discounting factor here? So that is not at all relevant. They want to confuse you which rate you should apply, 6% or 12%. So in this context, you should apply 12% as the discounting factor, because this project is having a risk of 6%. We are adding 6% as a risk premium to the discounting rate. In case if it is a risk-free project, then you have to discounting with what? 6%. But we don't have any description that the project is risk-free. That's why 12% should be taken. Then, so where it is covered in our material? CRD 10, page number 8.6. See, problem number 9, 8.6. 8.6, problem number 10. CRD 10. See, Invest Corporation Limited adjusts risk through discounting rates by adding risk premium to risk-free rate. So, depending on the resultant rate, the proposed project is judged low, medium, and high risk. So, in case if it is classified as low risk project, 8 plus 4, 12% is the RADR. It's a medium risk project, 15%. If it is a high risk project, 18%. So we are emphasizing on RADR. The cash flows are provided here because the purpose of doing analysis is to highlight the importance of RADR. We don't want to focus on the cash flows because the cash flows estimation procedure was already discussed in the investment analysis. So you can see for low risk projects RADR is 12%. For high risk projects the RADR is what? 18%. So the question which is given in the examination straight away provides the RADR. There is a single discounting rate for given level of risk. 12% is the required return from the project. So RADR is clearly defined. They are testing on cash flow estimation. So student can solve, student can estimate these cash flows with ease because they learned the estimation of cash flows in the investment analysis. Therefore, after doing this problem, the student can calculate the risk adjusted NPV with ease. So there is no difficulty in the estimation of NPV using RADR approach. In fact, this problem number 10 is much more advanced compared to the question which is given in the examination. This is about C1C and question number 4. This is given from dividend decisions. The concept here, Volter model. So how to find the fair value of share using Volter? D1 plus R by KE into E minus T divided by KE. Present value of perpetual dividends, present value of perpetual growing dividends. This is how you are finding the fair value. See, what you have to do? Find out the market value of share as per Volter. You should use this formula. Then compute the optimum dividend payout ratio according to Volter and the value of share at that payout ratio. See, this is R, this is KE. Since R greater than KE, the optimum dividend payout ratio is what? 0%. You should retain all your profits and the profit should be reinvested in the company's project. Hence, optimum dividend payout ratio is equal to 0%. Earnings of the company 30 lakhs, dividend payout ratio 60%, number of shares 5 lakhs. 30 lakhs divided by 5 lakhs. So that comes to, you can get the EPS of the company. 30 lakhs by 5 lakhs means 6 rupees. 6 rupees into 60%, 3.6 your EPS and 6 rupees is your DPS. Your DPS is equal to 3.6. Your EPS is equal to what? 6 rupees. Then, so where it is covered in our material? CRD 3. So it is already covered in guest questions. I would like to, the presence of guest questions is also there. We'll show at the end of the discussion. CRD 3, 9.3. 9.3. See this. The following is the information of XYZ Limited. Number of shares are given. EPS is given. So number of shares into EPS, earnings. 30 lakhs divided by 5 lakhs. 6 rupees is the EPS. So in our material, EPS and dividend per share are already calculated and given. So you can see dividend was paid at the rate 2.4 from 4 rupees EPS. That means what is the dividend payout ratio here? 60%. In terms of percentage of distribution is the quite same, but what you have to focus on, eventually you have to find the EPS, you have to find the dividend per share. So these 2 points are not directly given, but you can make it by dividing with the number of shares. You can get the EPS into 60%, you can get the dividend per share. That is the only difference. Equity capitalization rate is here. Rate of return on investment is also there here. What is the question number 1? Market value of share. What is the market value of share? And question number 2. So this is additionally added in our material, but it was not there in the examination question. What is the question number 3? What is the optimum payout ratio as per Walter? What is the market value of the share as per Walter? So these 2 points are clubbed here. And in point number 2, you have to express the optimum dividend payout ratio and you have to find the value of share at the optimum payout ratio. So this is the difference. So when comparing the question which is given in the examination, the question provided by us, that is quite advanced. So we are covering 4 points, but in examination question, they are just focusing on 3 points. Next. So from first part of the question, the first question, analysis of first question is moderate. Student can get at least 15 marks from this question. So those who have done all the problems given in our material, they can get 20 out of 20 from question number 1. Then question number 2, 10 marks. It is given for 10 marks. The concept here, marginal cost of capital. So it is covered in cost of capital chapter. What do you have to find? The pattern of raising funds, post-tax average cost of debt, cost of equity, KE, KD, pattern of raising funds, that means how much should come from the debt and how much should come from equity. Then finally, according to this pattern, you should adjust the cost of these 2 sources. So that would be the weighted average marginal cost of capital. So you can see this is a direct question from our material. Cost of capital, CRD 26 3.19, page number, see this. Arise Limited wishes to raise additional funds of 10 lakhs. Additional funds of 30 lakhs. Cost of debt, debt equity mix 30:70. Debt equity ratio 2:1. So cost of borrowing up to 1.8 lakhs, 10% before tax, beyond 1.8 lakhs, 16%. The cost of borrowing 0 to 5 lakhs, 10%, 5 lakhs to 10 lakhs, 9%, above 10 lakhs, 8%. See, we have 2 slabs for borrowing up to 1.8 lakhs, beyond 1.8 lakhs. But in this context, 3 slabs are given. That is the only change when compared to our material. Earning per share, dividend payout ratio, expected growth rate, current market price of the share. You can see earning per share, dividend per share, expected growth rate, market price and tax rate, all are same. So except this is a slight variation from the our problem. So this one, but this is not an issue, because one of the problem which is covered in capital structure having the same borrowing pattern. In fact, after doing this, the student can able to calculate the cost of debt of additional finance. So you can see the questions: pattern of rising finance, post-tax average cost of debt, cost of retained earnings. This is the additional point added in our material, but there is no financing from the reserves. Therefore, you can see our problem is much advanced when compared to the question which is given in the examination, because in our material the student has to find cost of equity as well as the cost of reserves. So in this context there is no financing from the reserves, therefore you only have the cost of equity. The problem is simple when compared to our problem. So overall weighted average cost of additional finance, this is also given. So the pattern of the question is the same, except there is a change in values. So in professional exams, you don't expect same values from the any material. So what you have to find, what you have to focus, you have to focus on the content of the problem, structure of the problem. Structure and content of the problem is the same. There is no change. Except there is slight variations in the values, you don't have to consider that. You have to ignore. So that is why we have given 80% weightage to this problem, because of that slight deviation in the pattern of borrowing. In fact, so we are making this estimate on conservative basis. That is why, even though the question is more advanced, our question is more advanced compared to the question which is given in the examination, we are doing analysis on conservative basis. Thereby, in some questions we have reduced the percentage of comparison. So in fact, this was covered in our guest questions. Question number 1, page number 4, CRD, cost of capital, question number 26. It was there. Question number 26. We don't want to prove that this question was covered in our material, because it was already proved. In fact, in the last 6 attempts, on average 70% of the final exam questions have come from our guest questions. That is why we don't want to prove. That is why in most of the questions the guest questions appearance was not displayed. This is only for your sake. You can see 26 is there in our guest questions. Problem number 4, page number 108. So this is the guest questions which are released from our cost of capital chapter 43 edition, problem number 26. Then problem number 3, it comes from ratio analysis. In the last 6 attempts, we have been continuously tracking this chapter. A 5 marks question have come from this chapter in compulsory section A, B, C, D. But contrary to the trend, in this attempt, this question was separated from the compulsory section. Now it is asked as 10 marks question. So sales was given, return on net worth given, rate of income tax is given. What do you have to find? Operating expenses of the company, and with the help of these ratios you should prepare a balance sheet. So how much is the operating expenses incurred by the company? At the same time, what would be the balance sheet? So you can see this was directly come from our material, ratio analysis, assignment problem number 8, page number 10.27. This one. Sales, problem number 8, sales 60 lakhs. Here is 75 lakhs. Return on net worth 25%, income tax rate 50%, 25%, 50%, same here. Share capital to resource 6:4, 7:3. There is a slight deviation. Current ratio 2.5 here. Net profit after tax 6.5%, 6.25% here. Cost of goods sold is there. Receivables, debtors are also given 2 lakhs. But what is the difference here? Debtors includes receivables including 1,25,000. In fact, debtors includes bills receivable. So this is not a separate point. In the balance sheet, you have to write 2 lakhs. Out of 2 lakhs, 1,25,000 is the debtors outstanding from the debtors. The balance 75,000 is the bills receivable. On segregation of this, there is no sense because the total remains the same. So this is slight deviation from our problem. And sundry creditors is given in lump sum 2 lakhs, but instead of giving sundry creditors means current liability. But in this case, payables and overdraft are separated. So put together 2,50,000 and 1,50,000 put together, they are the part of current liabilities. So you can see operating expenses for the year ending 31st March 2017. The balance sheet and the pro forma balance sheet is also given. You can see this. Same line. Same line. No change. This is about problem number 3. So what is the percentage of coverage here? 90. But in fact, it is 100%. I told you, we are making estimation on conservative basis. Advanced concepts in next question, question number 4. So the focus is replacement analysis. They have been using a machine for the last 2 years, which is having a life of 6 years. That means it is now having a balanced life of 4 years. Now they want to replace this machine with a new machine, which is having the same expected life. Old machine is having the expected life of 4 years. At the same time, the new machine is having expected life of 4 years. Estimated life. The similar problem was covered in our material where it is CRD 7.4, which has been in operation from last 2 years. Estimated life, remaining useful life 4 years, remaining useful life 10 years. So there is a slight variation in the values, but the structure of the problem is the same. No salvage value at the end, no residual value at the end. Current market value 3 lakhs, current market value 1 lakh. The management is considering a proposal to purchase the improved model of similar machine. So you can see existing machine and new machine. Purchase price, estimated life, salvage value, purchase price, estimated life, salvage value, residual value, annual operating days, annual hours per day, selling price per unit, material cost per unit. You can see selling price, output, material cost, labor cost, everything is same except fixed overheads per annum. So consumable stores and repairs and maintenance, usually they are classifying as a semi-variable cost. So while doing analysis, these semi-variable costs are treated as fixed cost. Even though when we thought as providing solution, these two expenses, consumable stores and repairs and maintenance, were classified as a fixed cost in analysis. So while finding operating cash flows, these two are categorized as fixed cost. Income tax 30%. Then working capital is also given. Working capital is also there. Income tax rate is 50%. Income tax rate is 30%. Except there is a change in some values, the structure and the content of the problem is one and the same. You see, there is a slight variation in the question. See, WDV, they are providing depreciation at the rate of 20% on WDV. It has several machines in the plot. So this point, the most of the students are not considering. they are indirectly saying that you must follow block of assets concept. You know that depreciation is provided on the block of assets. What do you mean by block of assets? A group of assets which are falling under the class of assets with respect of which the same rate of depreciation is applicable. Machinery is a group which is classified as a block, and furniture is a block, buildings are a block, computer and computer softwares are the block. Like that, in Income Tax Act, we are doing classification of different assets on the basis of block. Accordingly, we should provide depreciation according to the respective rates. So here we go. The rate of depreciation is 20% on the WDV. There are several machines in the block. So what is the difference between the question which is covered in this paper and the which is covered in our material? So in our material, the block of assets concept was not included. Here additionally added there. How to do this? You know how to calculate the closing WDV, opening WDV of the block plus purchases minus sales. This would be the closing WDV. See, they are purchasing the machine for 10 lakhs. The existing machine, if sold today, is going to fetch 3 lakhs. So that means what is the incremental value added to this block? 10 lakhs minus 3 lakhs, 7 lakhs. So you should provide depreciation at the rate 20% on 7 lakhs first year, then thereafter 20% on the WDV of first year, second year, third year. See, when the block is having several assets, at the time of sale of machinery which is added to the block. So for example, in this block there are 5 machines. Out of 5 machines, you want to replace one of the machine with new machine. Of course, this replaced asset will be sold in the 4th year. This is called terminal year. But even though you are disposing this machine, some machines are continued in this block. In that event, section 50 clearly says that you should not calculate any capital gain with respect to transferred asset. What you have to do, you have to provide the depreciation on the sale. That is why in 4th year you should provide depreciation. How to calculate this? Opening WDV at the beginning of 4th year plus purchases less sale value with respect to replaced asset, then whatever closing value is there, so on the closing value you should provide depreciation. In fact, this concept was separately covered in material under the heading block of assets. You can see the student who is doing all the concepts here, they can able to solve this with ease. See, block of assets and depreciation. So this problem number 1, no other assets in the same block. Problem number 1 means problem number 12, and problem number 13, you can see there are several assets in the block. Expanding operations, midst of replacing one of its original cost, life 10 lakhs, life 10 years, depreciation WDV, remaining life 6 years. The new machine being considered for replacement having cost of 15 lakhs, salvage value 10 lakhs at the end of 6 years. So the similar concept was there. So a student who is done problem number 3 in our material and problem number 12 in our material, 13 in our material. So they can do this very easy because they knew the concept. When the block is having several assets, we should not provide any provision for capital gains. We should not find the capital gain or capital loss, short-term capital gain or capital loss in the event of disposal of asset. All you have to do is you have to provide depreciation in the terminal year of transfer. This comes from advanced concepts, and easiest of all, problem number 5, leverages. You can see there is a balance sheet having assets worth 30 crores. The additional information is also given. Fixed cost excluding interest 6 crores, variable cost 60%, asset turnover ratio. What do you mean by asset turnover ratio? Sales by total assets. You know the total assets 30 crores. They are saying that if assets are 1 rupee, if investment in assets is 1 rupee, they are getting a revenue of how much? 2.5 rupees. So with the help of asset turnover ratio and with the help of investment in assets, we can get sale value. Sales are 30 crores into 2.5. So income tax rate is 40%. Earning per share, operating leverage, financial leverage, combined leverage. That's all. So to find EPS and the rest of leverages, what you have to do? You have to prepare an income statement. How to prepare? Sales minus variable cost, contribution minus fixed cost, that would be the EBIT, minus interest, EBT, minus tax, EAT. After finding EAT, since there are no preference shares in the balance sheet, this EAT becomes what? Earnings to equity shareholders. So important point here, sales information is missing. Except that the structure of the question is quite simple. It's a normal question. So with the help of asset turnover ratio, what you have to do? You have to find revenue, sales. Variable cost, fixed cost, everything is there. So APSP 5.2, 90%. 5.2. Straight question. It is quite easy. You can see. Problem number 3. 5.2, 90%. See, fixed cost per annum excluding interest 4 crores, 6 crores. Variable cost as a percentage 65%. It is 60%. Asset turnover ratio 2.5. Here also 2.5. Tax rate 30% that we are given. So in this case 40%. What is required? EPS, operating leverage, financial leverage, and combined leverage. Same question. Then so that is why the percent is given as 90%. So first 5 questions have been completed. Student can get 10 out of 10 from problem number 5. I am talking about a moderate student. Student can get 10 out of 10 from third question. 10 plus 10, 20. Yes, student can get 10 out of 10 from problem number 2. But I have observed some of the students to whom I have interaction, they have ignored this point. So without looking at this point, if you did this, in case if there is any separate guidelines in the examination that if student ignores the block of assets concept, still give same marks, then the situation is different. Otherwise, for the remaining calculations, if there is no if there is no separate guidelines with respect to the valuation process, and the student have to consider the block of assets concept, then the student may not get complete full marks from this question. At least he is going to get 50% of this. That means 5 marks is guaranteed. 5 to 6 marks, that depends on I told you I'm doing estimation on conservative basis. Then problem number 6, the main focus only on theory concepts. It's a separate question on theory concepts. In every exam, starting from May 2018. Yes, one question has been compulsorily asking from the sources of finance. Now it is termed as types of finances. So this post-shipment finance, the concept and forms of post-shipment finance is a part of types of finance or sources of finance. So this was there in our material, but it is not part of guest questions. Question number 33, 3.18 and 3.18. You can see different types of packing credit and what are the various modes of post-shipment finance. Purchase bills, discounting of documentary export bills, ECGC guarantees, advance against exports bills sent for collection, like that. So you need to write at least 4 points from the, so point 1, point 2, point 3 and point 4. So these 4 points you must answer. Then question number B, 6P, what are the silent features of forfeiting? So forfeiting, factoring, two different concepts. So factoring speaks about domestic finance for receivables, whereas forfeiting speaks about finance given for export trades or foreign debtors. So this is part of working capital management. It is covered. List out the steps to be followed by finance manager to measure and maximize the shareholders' wealth. This point is newly added in the study material. So what are the steps to be followed by the finance manager in order to evaluate, in order to measure the wealth of the shareholders? So 3 points here. First thing, he has to find out the future economic benefits on the basis of cash profit instead of accounting profit. Because we are doing investment in cash, the cost benefits must be done on cash basis. That is point number 1. Point number 2, he has to consider the time value of money. He has to consider the time value of money. After considering the time value of money, he has to do the cost benefit analysis. Cost benefit analysis, considering the cash profit instead of accounting profit, and considering the time value of money. So these 3 steps are required in order to maximize the wealth of the shareholders. Because while doing cost benefit analysis, cost means what is the required investment as on today. Benefit means the expected return from the project. So that expected return from the project should be quantified on cash basis instead of accounting basis. That point. Point number 2, he has to recognize the time value of money. Then what are the limitations of accounting rate of return? So this is the quite simple question, all of you know. So accounting rate of return is a method of evaluation of long-term investments which ignores the timing of cash flows. It ignores time value of money. That is the first limitation. Second limitation is that accounting rate of return is based on accounting profit. So considering the accounting profit, ignoring the time value of money, these 2 aspects are the major limitations of accounting rate of return. In fact, the project's cash flows, the project's returns must be quantified on cash basis instead of accounting basis. So this is question number 6. I think instead of writing question number 4, the students has to answer this question. See, while doing initial planning, first you have to look at the questions which are covered in the question paper. In question number 1, A, B, C, D, first you have to ensure whether you can able to answer all the questions, is there is any difficulty. So while reading the question, if you have any confusion and you are unable to understood what is the exact intention of the examiner, it is better to left the question number 1. So you have to keep some space, then you start answering the questions. In question number 2 to question number 6, you have to focus on a question which is very convenient and easy. That question you have to answer first. After writing this, you can see there is substantial increase in your confidence levels. Your focus is going to rise. Therefore, you can do the remaining questions with very comfort, and there is no difficulty in your presence. That is why first we have to create a comfort level before writing the exam solution for a or answer for a particular question. So these points you should keep it in mind, and moreover this question paper is 80% easy, 20% moderate. In my opinion, student will get minimum of 40 out of 60. A moderate student, and at the same time, the students who have gone through all the concepts covered in our material, they can get at least 50 out of 60 marks in this question paper. Okay then, thank you so much. All the best.